So, welcome to LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've got about 24 clips on a few topics for what I think should be an interesting show tonight. As always, this is my weekly broadcast of the best clips from the Sunday morning news analysis shows from the corporate media here in the United States, along with a little political comedy and along with my commentary between the clips. And as usual, I'll be using clips from the Sunday morning news shows on the regular Big Five outlets of ABC, NBC, CBS, CNN, and Fox News, plus some quasi-news clips from Friday's Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO. I'll mainly be talking about the referendum in the Crimea and the crisis in the Ukraine with Russia, but I wanted to start with a few clips on this deepening mystery about this missing Malaysian airliner. And while it's certainly not a funny story, I have been expecting to see the coverage that I saw Bill Maher joke about last Friday in his monologue here.
No, there is actually a fourth possibility that Republicans are putting forward, that the plane went down because it was emboldened by Obama's weakness. That apparently is an answer for everything. In fact, on Fox and Friends, Steve Doocy said it was a strange coincidence that Obama also has a daughter named Malaysia. So we have to...
I guess, I don't know, was that funny? I don't know if that was actually funny, but I just wanted to show that clip as sort of an intro to the clips I have on the missing Malaysian airliner. I haven't actually seen Fox News or Steve Doocy try to blame this missing Malaysian airliner on Obama's weakness, although they've certainly done that with the Ukraine story. I even made a video about that like a week or so ago, but I want to show a few clips on some of the developing stuff on the missing Malaysian airliner. There have been a lot of developments since I showed a couple clips last week that were supposedly showing that there was some catastrophic incident right in between, about an hour into the flight. Well, there's been all sorts of new information about how it flew 6 or 7 hours after that, and there's this huge arc of area where it could be, and I'm going to show a clip if you haven't seen that. Here's a clip talking about that from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
George, this map released by the Malaysian officials shows the possible arc locations of where Flight 370 sent its last hourly transmission, which we now know happened more than 7 hours after initial takeoff. Malaysian officials say they're searching both of these areas, both of these arcs, north and south, equally. But according to two sources close to the investigation who have talked to ABC News, searchers will intently focus on the area off Western Australia. Their hunt for this missing aircraft is a search area of at least 1,200 miles.
So, yeah, it doesn't sound like they're going to be finding it anytime soon if they have to search in that area. I mean, there's this theory about it going to the north and this theory about it going to the south. They're saying it couldn't have gone on that northern arc because there's too much radar coverage there. I did have a couple clips I want to show from Fox News Sunday, first Michael McCaul over on Fox News Sunday talking about the terrorist scenarios with the whole Malaysian airliner missing, and I'll talk about that a little more after I show the clip here.
There has been speculation that this plane may have landed somewhere with the hopes that it could be used at some point later as a weapon, perhaps loaded with explosives. How seriously, as the chairman of House Homeland Security, how seriously are security officials taking that scenario?
Well, we're concerned with that. I know there are two routes that it could have possibly taken. One would be to the north towards Kazakhstan, which would be close to Afghanistan, Pakistan. I think that would be unlikely because our radar detection systems would have picked that up had it gone that route. I think the intelligence community and Homeland Security believe that it possibly more likely went the southern route, which would be towards Australia, Indonesia. Now, two scenarios are here. One is the plane ran out of fuel and landed in the ocean, and it's, that's a bad scenario. The other one is it landed in a country like Indonesia, where it could be used later on as a cruise missile, as the 9/11 hijackers did. That's something we have to use our imagination in these situations. We don't have all the information before us, But we have to look at all these possibilities, whether it be towards Kazakhstan, which I do think our radar detection systems would have picked that up, or to the south towards Indonesia, which is, a friendly country to the terrorist, and used to land there and then used later in a plot to blow up an airplane.
Having said all of that,
So yeah, there's Republican Mike McCaul, of the chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, talking about all the possible terrorist scenarios, or some of the possible terrorist scenarios that could have taken this airliner off of its course. Although he actually goes on to say after that he thinks it's really the pilot. There's something having to do with the pilot, and that seems to be where the investigation is focusing. But I want to show one more clip about terrorism. This is Representative Peter King. He's head of the House Intelligence Committee. He's also a Republican. He was over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking to George Stephanopoulos, and he also talked about the terrorist scenarios. And he seemed focused too much on the Iranians, I thought, but I'll let you see what you think after I show the clip here.
U.S. officials.
No, there's been no terrorist connections whatsoever. There's been no terrorist chatter. There's nothing out there indicating it's terrorist. Doesn't mean it's not, but so far nothing has been picked up by the intelligence community from day one. I still have questions about the 2 Iranians around the plane, but again, that could be a side issue. The fact is nothing has come up indicating a terrorist nexus.
What's your biggest question about the Iranians?
Just the fact that they were there and written off so quickly as having any threat. I mean, why do they have to get on that plane to seek asylum? The fact that it was so easy for them to get on with stolen passports, it just creates a terrorist atmosphere. Having said that, there's nothing showing it. I just wouldn't rule that out now. That's all.
Yeah, so I guess Peter King there thinks that having Iranians who got on board with fake passports creates a terrorist atmosphere. I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but I wanted to show the clip, let you tell me what you think. I am going to try to get some live discussion going from the comments that you leave in the discussion section after I show, I think I have 23 clips. So those were the first 4 I wanted to show on the missing Malaysian airliner. Now I want to show a whole bunch of clips on what's going on in Crimea and the Ukraine. There are a couple breaking stories on that. Not only there was the vote held in Crimea today, and I've seen, I don't have any clips on it, but I've seen reports that something like 95% of the vote went towards joining Russia. So but pretty much everyone who was discussing what was going on in Crimea today expected that to happen. One of the breaking news stories is that supposedly there's some Russian troops outside of Crimea in the Ukraine at this gas distribution center or something like that. And I'll play. This is reporter Alex Marquardt, also on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, explaining this breaking news about Russian troops in the Ukraine outside of Crimea here.
The international focus is shifting from Crimea to eastern Ukraine. Almost 9,000 Russian troops have massed along Ukraine's border. While in eastern cities, dueling protests have grown deadly. And now Russia says it is considering calls to intervene.
So yeah, there's the possible next step in this whole thing will be Russian troops intervening in the Ukraine outside of Crimea. That seems to be what's going on, or possibly. I mean, there's at least that one story in that one place, and I want to show Senator Jeff Flake, who was over on I think this Week with George Stephanopoulos, talking about how he doesn't think that Ukraine has the military force to fight the Russians because they've pretty much been hollowed out, and I'll show you that clip here.
Were to move into the eastern part of the country?
Their military has been hollowed out over the past couple of years. They have, according to some Ukrainians, we have nothing that shoots, runs, or flies. Mm-hmm. And it's because the Russians have had such close ties with the previous government that they hollowed the military out. So yes, they need a lot of help, but nothing that we can do will help the Ukraine withstand what Russia is going to do if they decide to go into.
But what if Russia decides not to?
I'm sorry, that was Senator Jeff Flake on NBC's Meet the Press, not ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos. And Senator Dick Durbin was also on there, and he was talking about how he wasn't really talking about a military option either, but he was talking about how they're passing aid for economic aid for the Ukraine, and then also they're putting together these sanctions. And I'm going to show you a lot more about what's going on with the sanctions. But first, here's Dick Durbin talking about what they're trying to do in the Senate.
Well, there are plenty of things we can do, and the president is working now to put together an agenda. We passed, Jeff and I are in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, we passed a measure 14-4, bipartisan measure last week that provides not only economic assistance to Ukraine and the possibility of IMF loans coming their way with reform, but also some very serious sanctions against Russia for its conduct.
What about
So yeah, there's that, and then one clip I wanted to show you that I seem to have skipped over there. This is actually the best breaking newsmaker news I have found. Is the foreign minister of the Ukraine was interviewed on This Week with George Stephanopoulos and asked about these troops in the Ukraine outside of Crimea at that gas distribution center, and he basically said they were going to respond with military force. I noticed that neither George Stephanopoulos nor the ABC reporter Bianna Glodryga actually said the name of the Ukrainian foreign minister, but I believe his name is Andrii Deshchytsia. Hopefully I'm pronouncing that right. And here are a couple questions he answered from the ABC reporter on This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
To Ukraine's foreign minister.
That's right. I did speak with the foreign minister, and he's hopeful but not very optimistic that this will be resolved peacefully. But I started the interview by asking him about whether or not that gas plant was seized.
We do see it as a provocation, and one of those many provocations that Russians are trying to organize on the territory of Ukraine. We will not go for provocation, since we wanted to go for a peaceful solution of this crisis.
And your ministry actually issued a statement saying that Ukraine reserved the right to use all necessary means to stop a military invasion by Russia. Do you have the military to back up that statement?
Look, if you compare the military arsenals of Ukraine and Russia, of course, the Russians' positions are much better, overwhelming positions and strengths. But however, what we have on Ukrainian side, something that is very important in confrontations, and this is that all the nation is proud of, is the spirit of Ukrainian people.
And
Now, I'm kind of skeptical that the spirit of the Ukrainian people is going to overcome the major military advantage that the Russian troops have, but I mean, I guess that's good to hear, at least, that they are going to try to maintain their territorial integrity against these Russian troops who seem to be coming in. And I want to show also a clip. This is Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut, a Democrat from Connecticut. He also said everyone in the United States seems to be saying there are really no military options, despite what the foreign minister of Ukraine said there. And here's Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut saying there's no military options, but he seems to think that there are going to be sanctions imposed tomorrow, as you can see from this clip from ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos this morning here.
Well, I don't think there's anything that we can do militarily. Clearly, this is a longer-term effort to build up the Ukrainian military. But if on Monday we announce with the European Union a set of crippling sanctions coming after not only individuals but Russian business entities, I think that sends a strong message to Putin. I think he marched into Crimea because he didn't believe that the United States and Europe would actually take a chunk of flesh out of his economy. And if we stand together on Monday, that gives us a chance at least to change the calculus in Moscow.
You think?
So that sounds like that might be the next story, that there may be sanctions that are all getting, I guess the foreign ministers of all the EU countries are meeting tomorrow, and I'm going to get to some clips on that in a minute, but I want to show Bob Menendez saying that he talked about how the Senate passed, the Foreign Relations Committee passed these sanctions against and assistance to Ukraine over on Fox News Sunday this morning over in this clip.
Well, I think that the question will be, what does Russia do in response? And having those sanctions ready, whether it be against the defense minister, the Federal Security Service, the secretary of their Security Council, possibly the executives of Gazprom and Rosneft, which are their oil and gas companies, send a very clear message. Now, if Russia does enact it in the Duma and their Congress to go ahead and accept annexation, that's one thing. But if they move towards that goal, then I think ultimately the sanctions need to be enforced along with our European allies, because that will have the biggest bite.
Now, yeah, that's another senator talking about sanctions, and I've talked about the problem with sanctions over the last couple of weeks about whether Europe is actually going to go along with it. You know, I said last week that one of the great things about free trade is that it benefits both parties, but that means that when you have some good free trade going, or trade going between the EU and Russia, putting sanctions on that trade also hurts the members of the EU. I think I see some people talking about that in the comment section, but over on CNN State of the Union, they actually had the foreign ministers of the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. No, not the foreign ministers, sorry, the ambassadors to the United States from those three countries. And they seemed very confident that Europe was going to impose these sanctions and stick with the United States, and some real biting sanctions. First, I'll show, this is the British ambassador to the United States, or the UK ambassador to the United States, Peter Westmacott, and he's saying that the referendum is a fraud, and the EU is going to react in the next couple days over in this clip.
I think we have to wait and see how this turns out. We do not believe it to be constitutional or legal, as Peter says, that this referendum has taken place. It is a fraud, and asking people what they think at the barrel of a gun is not exactly an exercise in participatory democracy. It's also contrary to all the agreements which Russia has signed in terms of the status of the Ukrainian sovereign territory. So let's see how this comes out. I think what's going to happen is that tomorrow you will see an exercise in very close coordination between European and American partners, the international community coming together to determine its response. But I think we are a very long way from accepting that Ukraine should just be somehow chopped off, that Crimea should be chopped off Ukrainian territory and handed on a plate to Russia. I think we have to...
Oh, I seem to have looped that one. So, yeah, that's the British ambassador to the U.S. saying that Europe's going to be in line, but I guess the real question is whether Germany is going to participate in these sanctions, or at least that was the big question I was talking about last week. But I guess Angela Merkel from Germany came out and said that Germany is going to stick with these sanctions, and that was kind of echoed by the German ambassador to the United States. His name is Peter Ammon, I believe is how it's pronounced, and he was also over on CNN State of the Union with Candy Crowley, saying that they were going to participate in strong sanctions against Russia, as you can see in this clip.
I've never seen such a degree of unanimity across the Atlantic. We are singing from the same hymn sheet, as you say here, and we will have the European foreign ministers meeting tomorrow, and they will discuss sanctions for the first time, and these sanctions probably will include travel bans, visa bans, and asset freezes. So this is really hard stuff.
Across the board travel bans, across the board asset freezing, so you say to the Russian elites, sorry, you're not coming here, we've frozen your assets?
Well, the details will be hammered out tomorrow, but let me say quite clearly, because it was discussed here in the US quite often, the German foreign policy is not driven by any consideration about gas or oil. This is and the German Industry Federation has made it very clear, foreign policy is the priority, and all other interests have to step back in this.
Mm-hmm. So, at least according to the German ambassador to the United States, Germany is not going to be driven by its oil and gas needs in whether it joins these sanctions. That is going to take a back seat to the importance of upholding the sovereignty of the Ukraine. So if that's true, then the problems that we were talking about last week of getting real sanctions from Europe onto Russia, that, I mean, maybe that's really going to happen. I mean, that's, I showed you the who was it? It was Dick Durbin who said that they were actually, I'm sorry, Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut actually said they were going to do that tomorrow, and it sounds like the EU is meeting tomorrow, so sometime in the next few days, especially if the Russian Duma decides to accept this Crimean referendum and accept Crimea into the Russian Federation, it sounds like there may really be real sanctions that the EU is going to stick with. Also, that seemed to be the position of Dan Pfeiffer, the White House senior advisor, was over on Meet the Press, and he was asked several questions about this, and I would show he basically gave the same line. I guess the White House, I mean, there is a lot of unanimity on this line that the referendum is illegal and there are going to be sanctions, and I'll show you that clip over here.
Referendum.
Yeah.
As we've said, this referendum is in violation of international law. The United States is not going to recognize the results of that referendum, and we are working with our partners around the world, the Europeans in particular, to marshal forces against the Russians to put pressure on them in the form of sanctions. And the president has signed an executive order last week that gives him the authority to do this, and you can expect sanction designations in the coming days.
So yeah, there's the representative of the White House, Dan Pfeiffer, senior advisor to Obama, saying that Obama is going to impose sanctions, and I assume they're going to match up with these EU sanctions, so maybe that's really going to happen. And also, I noticed Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut over on This Week with George Stephanopoulos, he not only said that the sanctions were going to be imposed immediately, but he also gave stronger voice to this argument that by taking Crimea, Putin is going to lose the rest of the Ukraine, although that's what's a little disturbing about these Russian troops in parts of the Ukraine that aren't Crimea. And anyway, I'll talk about that a little more after the show. Here's the clip from Chris Murphy talking about that on ABC's This Week with George Stephanopoulos here.
Well, I don't think there's anything that can be done to reverse the vote. I mean, I'd be surprised if it's not 70, 80, 90%, given the fact that the Russians have shut down all of the Ukrainian media inside of the region. But I don't think that Putin's ambition is Crimea here. Ultimately, his ambition is to try to keep control of the entirety of Ukraine. If he controls Crimea and loses the rest of Ukraine, which is 95% of the population, that's a loss for Russia's world power and prestige. So I think he may stop after this referendum and try to negotiate something with Ukraine that would pull them away from the European Union. But in every single meeting that we did while we were on the ground in the last few days, there is no appetite from the new Ukrainian government to do a deal with Russia that forestalls their plan to join the European Union.
The question is then...
So actually what Senator Chris Murphy said about how Russia may try to do some kind of negotiation, there is some breaking news on that I'll show in just a minute, but first I want to show another clip from Fox News Sunday. This is the Obama is weak argument is still getting a lot of play on Fox News and from the Republicans, and here you can see the supposedly straight news anchor Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday teeing up Republican Senator Bob Corker from Tennessee to make this Obama is weak argument. And I will show you that clip. Right here.
Of resolve Senator Corker on Friday, after 6 hours of talks between Secretary of State Kerry and Russian Foreign Minister Lavrov ended without agreement, Kerry talked about sanctions, and then he said this.
We hope President Putin will recognize that none of what we're saying is meant as a threat. It's not meant as a, in a personal way.
Senator Corker, not a threat, not meant in a personal way. The invasion of Crimea started over 2 weeks ago. And you talk about resolve, but there really has been no action taken against the Russians up to this point. And here you have Secretary Kerry saying not personal, not a threat. Is the U.S. sending a message of resolve or weakness?
Well, look, there's no question that I think our administration has created an air of permissiveness, and it's those kinds of comments, you know, Secretary Kerry and Lavrov exchanging gifts, and it just, I think that it's those comments that cause Putin to question what our resolve is. But I do think, again, as Senator Menendez mentioned, if Russia takes the steps, assuming the popular vote today is what we think, and that is that Crimea votes to associate, to become a part of Russia, and then the Duma does the things necessary to make that happen, we have to show long-term commitment to this, not some short-term prick, but long-term commitment. And no question, it will affect Europe, it's going to affect the United States, but without that, Putin will continue to do this. He did it in Georgia a few years ago. He's moved into Crimea, and he will move into other places unless we show that long-term resolve. So I do think the comment that Secretary Kerry made is not helpful. And again, it shows a wishy-washiness that we do not, as a nation at this point, need to show. We have commitments, and you know this. The Bucharest Memorandum said that we would protect the sovereignty of Ukraine. And our nation, along with Europe, the UK signed this also. We need to protect Ukraine. They gave up their nuclear weapons. And what does that say to nuclear proliferation? So this is a very important time for us. It's a defining moment for us and for Europe. And we need to be strong. We need to do it over the long term.
So, yeah, there's the Republican talking point that Obama's weakness is the problem here, and you know, it might be a stronger argument if he hadn't called the Budapest Memorandum the Bucharest Memorandum, but also if you listen back about two-thirds of the way through that clip, I think he may have called President Obama a short-term prick, but I could be wrong about that. I may be misinterpreting, but you can check that for yourself, especially if you're watching this as a recorded show. Just click back there and see if I'm right about that. But the Republican talking point about Obama being weak here sort of leads some people to think that Republicans would actually have some sort of military option, which I don't think they have. I noticed Bill Maher was making that point over on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher on last Friday. He was talking about how he thinks that this shows the difference between the parties, actually, and I do agree with him on this being a difference between the parties. I'm just not sure if it applies to the Ukraine, as I'll talk about a little more after I show the clip here.
In the Ukraine, I want to start with the idea that it does matter which party and politician you elect, because you hear that a lot in this country. The two parties are the same, two peas in a pod. Not when it comes to war, and that's the most important issue. Thank the God I don't believe in that President John McCain isn't in the White House, or President Mitt Romney, or any of these Republicans who always want to either get into a war or start some shit to show whose dick is bigger.
Now, I think that is true generally, and that Republicans are more militaristic, and Obama has, even though he did go into Libya and he has his drone policy, I think if we had a President McCain or possibly even a President Romney, that we might have gone to war in Syria or military strikes in Syria. We might be going to war with Iran instead of the sort of almost détente, or the possibility of there actually being some sort of nuclear agreement with Iran, which is in the middle of negotiations now. So in those areas, I think that Bill Maher's right, that it makes a difference whether you have a Democrat or a Republican. But on Ukraine, I don't think that's necessarily true. And one of his guests, what's her name? I think it was Amy Chua, the Tiger Mom. She basically said that you know, it didn't make any difference in Georgia that there was a Republican, and that it's just we don't have a lot of military options with the, you know, going up against Russia right on their border, and we do have some diplomatic leverage apparently, though. I think that Russia may be starting to take these sanctions seriously, because the last piece of breaking news on, and this is the last Ukraine clip I'm going to play, was that apparently the foreign minister of Russia, Lavrov, has made a statement that they want to come to some sort of negotiated agreement having to do with constitutional change in the Ukraine. And this was reported over on CBS's Face the Nation. I'll show you Bob Schieffer reporting it and then getting the reaction of Republican Mike Rogers. And then I'll talk about it a little more after I show the clip here.
Let me shift to Ukraine. You heard earlier this late-breaking news that the Russian Foreign Ministry says that Secretary of State Kerry and the Russian Foreign Minister have agreed to settle this thing through constitutional reform of some sort in Ukraine. What did you make of that?
Well, I mean, we've seen this movie before. We should be cautious. I want to know exactly what was offered in exchange. Right now, Russia is feeling a unique set of pressures other than the international community. It's their economy is starting to suffer. You know, Russia is so dependent on energy as the propping up their economy. Any disruption in that cash flow has serious and real consequences. So if this was just to buy Russians time, I'm concerned about it. If this was truly an effort to allow the referendum to happen, which is what I think the Russians are doing, so that they have the strength in any negotiation with Ukraine, the government of Ukraine, you know, that's a whole different story. The United States needs to take a pretty strong stand in relationship with our EU partners. Now would be the time to try to ramp some of that up as we get to those discussions. If we don't, it's the relief, the pressure on the pressure that the Russians need to continue to do and solidify their hold on the Crimean Peninsula.
So yeah, I don't know how that story's gonna play out. That breaking news. That I don't know if there's anything to that. This sort of diplomatic move by the Russians, and if that's just a way to play for time and to avoid these sanctions going into effect that I showed several people talking about before. That, you know, Senator Chris Murphy said they might go into effect tomorrow, and that's when the EU is meeting, and those ambassadors from the UK and from Germany, they were all, and France were all saying that they thought these sanctions were going to go into effect. So it's quite possible that Russia's trying to make some sort of diplomatic move as just sort of a stalling tactic, but I'm not sure. I guess we're just going to have to wait and see what happens in the next few days and how Russia reacts to this referendum, which, from what I understand, has already passed. I think the last news I heard was a couple hours ago. There was like more than 50% of the votes counted and 95% for joining the Russian Federation. So anyway, those are the Ukraine clips I want to show. I want to show one clip on this story. I didn't see a lot of talk about this. Certainly not from, there was some talk from the pundits, commentating, and I don't like to commentate on the commentators, on this story about Dianne Feinstein picking a fight with the CIA. I guess, she's on the Senate Intelligence Committee, and they were investigating CIA use of torture, and they're putting together this whole report, and it's taken a long time, and I guess what she's saying is that the CIA came into the computers of the Senate investigators and deleted documents, and she's asking for an apology from John Brennan from the CIA, and the CIA is saying it didn't happen, and the CIA is actually accusing the Senate investigators of taking documents without authorization they weren't supposed to have, and I don't know what's going on with this. But I showed Dan Pfeiffer was over on Meet the Press talking to David Gregory, and he got asked a question about this, and this is kind of a touchy area for the White House because Dianne Feinstein is a big, important Democrat. She's from my state. I'm kind of embarrassed that she's a Democrat from my state because she's been really supportive of NSA spying and pretty much all these spying programs, which is why this is so remarkable. And so there's the strong Democrat that the White House, the strong Democratic Senator Dianne Feinstein that the White House has to worry about. But of course, the White House is also in charge of the CIA, so these are their people who are being accused of wrongdoing or at least people who their political appointees, Leon Panetta, right, in charge of the CIA. So when this was supposed to have happened, so Dan Pfeiffer, the senior advisor at the White House, was asked about this over on Meet the Press, and he basically dodged the question. There's really no information coming from him, but I want to show at least that one clip on the issue, and I spent a little time talking about it. So here's the clip for Dan Pfeiffer dodging the issue on Meet the Press.
Let me ask you about the debate now between the Senate and the CIA over past interrogation techniques, but there's become a big debate about this. Is this a fight over documents, or did the CIA spy on the Senate?
Well, look, let's take a step back to what this entire issue is about. This is about a Senate report into conduct conducted under the previous administration, conduct this president outlawed on his first day in office. We provided millions of pages of documents to the Senate, and the president is urging the Senate committee to finish the report as soon as possible so he can declassify the findings. Now, there are allegations on both sides, and those have been referred to the appropriate authorities at the Inspector General and the Department of Justice, and we'll let them get to the bottom of it.
So you're not prepared to say whether the head of the CIA, John Brennan, should apologize?
Let's let them get to the bottom of what happened here.
Let me ask you.
So yeah, like I said, Dan Pfeiffer, senior advisor to the Obama administration, or to President Obama, basically dodged that whole question. I think it's a really interesting issue. Hopefully more will come out, and I'll be able to cover it more in future videos, if not Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup videos, then maybe some sort of edited, produced video, because I think it's just a fascinating fight between Senator Dianne Feinstein, who's always seemed to support this spying, but then I guess when she gets spied on, all of a sudden she is getting really upset. So I want to cover that if I can get more facts about it. But that's the one clip on it I want to show today. I want to show a few more clips on just sort of political issues. Last week I showed the CPAC clips about sort of the split in the Republican Party, and that's sort of been ongoing this last week. The big political story this last week, there was a special election in Florida, and the Republican won using Obamacare as the issue, and it's looking more and more like the Republicans are going to hold on to the House, and they may even have a chance to take the Senate, which would be a really bad thing. And I'll talk about that a little more. But first I'm going to show a clip. This is from Friday night's Real Time with Bill Maher on HBO, talking about how Rand Paul may have a chance in the 2016 presidential election if he could get the nomination for the Republicans, because of the way he's reaching out to young people, especially like he did at CPAC, and he's making an argument about freedom that is going to really resonate against what Hillary Clinton may be doing, and I'll talk about it a little more after I show that clip here.
I think Rand Paul's attempt to say what most people in this country really understand, which is we don't need to run the world. We don't want to run the world. America will be a better place if we're less interested in our own power and more interested in our own freedom. And I think
he could give Hillary a run for her money.
I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
I think that's here. You have this young, kind of in a way, youth wing of the GOP.
Right.
Voting for
Snowden
a young person.
is one of those.
Voting for a young person, and if Hillary is the Democrat candidate, and you've got this guy who's like 2 generations younger than her,
and she'll come off like a neocon.
Yeah, and remember,
because in fact she is a bit of a neocon.
And remember that
I thought that was an interesting point from Andrew Sullivan there at the end, that compared to Rand Paul, Hillary Clinton might look like a neocon, and I suppose, thinking about it, there might be something to that. And that was Salman Rushdie in the middle there talking about the reaching out to the youth, and Hillary Clinton being much older than Rand Paul. I don't know if she's that much older, but did Bill Maher in the middle say that Edward Snowden was a Republican? I had never heard that, if that's true. But I noticed Bill Maher was not only on his show with the quasi-news clips I showed from there, but he actually appeared on NBC's Meet the Press and did an interview with Harry Smith. I think I have that right. Excuse me. And he was also, I was showing there some positive things about Republicans maybe being able to become the party of freedom against international power. We should be more concerned about the loss of our freedom than our international power. That's what Andrew Sullivan was saying Rand Paul's message might be. Well, here's Bill Maher saying why he thinks that almost no one should really be voting Republican, and I thought this was kind of a provocative statement he made over on Meet the Press here.
Understand why the 1%, the richest 1% vote Republican. They deserve those votes. You know what? They represent the richest 1% perfectly. Anybody else who does? Just corporate America's useful idiots.
So I don't know, is that true? Anyone who votes for the Republican Party who's not in the top 1% of income is a useful idiot for the corporations? Well, you can tell me what you think over in the comments section. I want to show one more clip that I thought was kind of funny from Bill Maher in his appearance on NBC's Meet the Press, where he was talking about how he goes out to red states but draws audiences who are basically liberals, because they're even in red states where a majority of the populations are, I think he used the word redneck, but are conservatives. There's still a lot of liberals that he can draw for his audience, and I kind of liked what he said about that to Harry Smith on NBC's Meet the Press here.
Better than blue states even. But there is an extra added excitement in red states, in places where people don't often see someone like me. There is not a place I can find in America that is so red that I can't get 3,000 screaming atheists to come see me on a Sunday, you know.
So yeah, I thought my viewers would like that he can, anywhere he goes in America, and I know some of my viewers are in some less liberal areas of the United States, that anywhere Bill Maher goes in America, he can still find 3,000 screaming atheists to show up on a Sunday. So I guess that's some good news about America. And for my viewers out there in Europe who think that those areas of the United States are totally homogeneously conservative, that's not exactly true. Before I leave the political stuff, I want to show one clip more from Dan Pfeiffer talking about the immigration issue, because more than any of that other stuff, I think that could be the best issue that works to the advantage of the Democrats. Obamacare may end up hurting the Democrats in the 2014 elections, but President Obama made this announcement that he's studying what he can do to stop or to change the deportation rules. It looks like comprehensive immigration reform is dead, and President Obama has actually been some people call him the deporter-in-chief. He's deported more people than George W. Bush did, and without comprehensive immigration reform, it makes it tough for him to claim any sort of victories to get those constituencies out to the polls, especially in off-year elections. So David Gregory asked Dan Pfeiffer about that, and I want to show his answer from NBC's Meet the Press this morning here.
If immigration reform is dead, the president's got to do something unilaterally, or else his own supporters, Democrats, are going to have a hard time with so many deportations and a president who fails to get immigration reform. Is immigration reform dead? Is that your fear? I know it's not your hope. Is it your fear?
Look, there is a window to pass immigration reform. There is a bipartisan majority for it in the House right now. There are a number of Republicans, I think the Speaker included, who sincerely want to solve this problem. The problem we have is that the power in the Republican Party right now is in the self-deportation wing of the party. And if the Speaker will allow a bill to come to the floor, I think we get something done.
So when does the window close?
I think we're going to keep pushing this and try to get this done as soon as possible.
Hard to see it this year, though, right?
Well, look, if it could happen this week if the Republicans would put a bill on the floor.
Final question about politics.
So, yeah, he seemed to say, Dan Pfeiffer seemed to say that comprehensive immigration reform might not be dead, but seems from, John Boehner made a statement a few weeks ago that basically it wasn't going to happen. And if he's not going to put it on the floor, it doesn't matter how many Democrats are willing to vote for it. He won't do it unless he has a majority of the Republicans in the House of Representatives. Even though even though it passed on a bipartisan basis in the Senate, it's not going to go through the House. Seems like it's dead, but I guess Dan Pfeiffer can't politically say that. I only have one more clip I want to show before I get to the comment section, and it's a little bit of a shorter show today, I guess. It was a little bit rushed for a variety of reasons, but the one other news story I thought was kind of interesting this last week is people were celebrating the 25th anniversary of the World Wide Web. And I'm not sure exactly how accurate that is. I guess they must be talking about something. I guess the first Mosaic web browser, is that the World Wide Web? Or I don't know. But David Gregory over on Meet the Press, he showed like a big flashback episode, not even to a previous Meet the Press. This is from KCRA TV in Sacramento, where I live. I watch KCRA. This is actually the station I watch Meet the Press on. And I guess David Gregory was a reporter in Sacramento in 1994, reporting on, and I guess that's not quite 25 years ago, but reporting on the big changes in the internet, and it's kind of quaint, as he points out himself. I'll show you that clip here.
What's out there is limitless. There's an internet yellow pages listing subjects of information from A to Z you can access on the system.
It's estimated there are at least 30 million people using the internet service worldwide, and experts predict by the turn of the century that number could go up to several hundred million.
And while the service has always been able to offer facts about the world or the weather, coming in 1995?
This is the Godiva chocolate homepage.
That's right. Purchasing power. You can buy such things as chocolates on the internet, or even order pizza from this electronic storefront.
Wow, I couldn't resist poking a little bit of fun at myself, the idea that you can buy chocolate on the internet. It's as if I did that 100 years ago.
That is kind of amazing to watch. I guess 1994 is, 20 years ago, not 25 years ago, so I guess the internet was already supposedly 5 years old then. They're saying the internet started in 1989. I mean, I remember you doing stuff on the internet back in the early 80s, but it wasn't the internet then. It was called BitNet, and it was like a university thing. That was when I was an undergraduate in like early to mid 1980s. And anyway, those are the clips I wanted to show you. I guess I got through the clips in about 45 minutes today, so I'm going to spend a few minutes here going through. Oh, it looks like YouTube signed me out in my comment page here. Okay, I'm gonna try to come through here and see if I can find some on-topic comments. Looks like got about 90 people, something like that, watching, so I want to honor that and see what you're all saying in the comments. See if I can get a little live discussion going, although you seem to be arguing with each other. Let me see. Oh, I see that NO8549 has pointed out that I have a new book up here, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Well, I showed a clip of her a couple weeks back on HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher, and I said I wanted to read that book. I haven't read it yet, but I just got it in the mail this week, and so I'm putting it up there to display while I'm actually going to start reading The Loudest Voice in the Room first, that book about Roger Ailes and Fox News. So I'll be doing that. But yeah, thanks for noticing. Let's see, Patch Rules 213 says, did the plane vanish? It could be a death ray that made the plane vanish, or am I wrong? I mean, at this point, it could be just about anything. And there are a lot of there's a lot of speculation, as some people are pointing out in there. Kevin B says, Peter King talking out of his ass. Yeah, I don't know why Peter King was like so against the Iranians. I mean, as I pointed out last week, Peter King has held these really anti-Islamic or Islamophobic hearings in the Congress, and so I'm not surprised that he is focusing on Iranians and saying that it gives sort of a terrorist atmosphere. I wasn't. Oh, and Hans Blitz points out Peter King was an IRA supporter in the 70s, so yeah, his focus on or concern about terrorism when it comes to Muslims does seem a little hypocritical, when he didn't really care so much about the Irish Catholics. But NO8549 says there will be no sanctions. Well, that's not what all those people who I just showed, including the ambassadors from France and Germany and the United Kingdom, all seem to say there were going to be sanctions. And Senator Chris Murphy from Connecticut said that there were going to be sanctions tomorrow, which that seemed a little fast to me, but it sounds like there are going to be. Ivoire the Paladin says the whole Russian thing is about Snowden. Well, that seems that might be an exaggeration. I think that the Snowden thing is one of the irritants in the U.S.-Russian relationship, but I don't think it really extends to this whole thing. But Ivoire the Paladin did put it in all caps, so I don't know if that adds credibility to that claim. Cobenizer says, how unoriginal. We had the Cold War when I was a kid. Why can't we have something new? Well, this actually isn't quite the Cold War. It is something new. It actually reminds me more of like 19th century stuff. That was the last time the Charge of the Light Brigade that was in the Crimea, wasn't it? And that was like another conflict between that was between the British and the Russians. I think it's more 19th century than Cold War, but I don't know. That's what John Kerry kept saying. It was like a 19th century action that doesn't work in the 21st century, but there's certainly a lot of land grabs in the 20th century. So, and the Iraq War, that was in the 21st century, but I don't think it's certainly an illegal or not internationally sanctioned military adventure, but I'm not sure it qualifies as a land grab. So. JRM 102 says, yes, that Republican had a point, but at the same time, Ukraine doesn't want to be nuked by Russia, so Ukraine decided to give up its nukes. Yes, in the Budapest Memorandum, not the Bucharest Memorandum, that's true. A couple weeks back, I actually put a link to the full text of the Budapest Memorandum, and it was signed by Russia and Great Britain and the United States, and it did guarantee the territorial integrity and sovereignty of the Ukraine. But I don't think Vladimir Putin really seems to care about that. Jay Wong says, if it's in the national interest of America to invade another country, they will, so why shouldn't other? Well, I have talked about last week, I think I showed some clips and talked about how what the U.S. did in Iraq is one of the reasons that we have no moral authority really to criticize Vladimir Putin, even though I think there are some differences, obviously. But, I think that may be why the Republicans keep making this argument that it's Obama's weakness to sort of distract people from the fact that it is America's lack of moral authority that really is a problem here. Although even if America had moral authority, I'm not so sure that it would stop Vladimir Putin from doing what he thinks is really important to his grand plans to save Russian orthodoxy and culture and sort of like all the places where there are Russians. He wants to create a Russian sphere of influence, and he has a view of the world that just doesn't match the Western view. That's the conclusion I've been coming to from watching a lot of coverage of this. I'm going to take one or two more comments. I think I'm almost up to an hour here in the broadcast, right? I don't know, maybe 53, 54 minutes, but I can end a little early, especially because I started late. I apologize for getting a little bit of a late start. I had some problems getting everything processed in time. I was doing everything right up to the last minute, and one thing I wanted to let you all know before I finish up is if you've noticed on Mondays I've been taking a clip out of the LiberalViewer Sunday Live Clip Roundup show, something that's like 3 to 5 minutes long, and I've been trying to turn it into a standalone video. And if any of you have suggestions about which clip or group of clips that add up to about that amount of time I should turn into a standalone video, I'd be happy to hear comments both from the people watching live and anyone watching between now and like Monday afternoon when I have to finally decide what I'm going to excerpt. And I don't know, maybe I won't even do it this week, but if you have suggestions, let me know about that. let me, so people are now talking about what I was talking about. William Hutton says, LV, please comment on leanin.org's ridiculous ban bossy campaign. Well, that is not an on-topic comment. I've seen a couple videos on that, and I'm not sure. I mean, I'm not someone who believes in banning words, but some of the analysis of it I've seen, I think, also doesn't really take into account some of the stereotypical gender roles that are forced on girls when they're pretty young, and is anyway. But I don't really want to get into that. Let me see if I've got. I see. Ryzen Link says, "What is in the black frame to the left of LV's head? Is that a YouTube award?" I think I showed this before. Yeah, this is my. Congratulations for surpassing 100,000 subscribers. I think they send that to you eventually when you hit that mark. So, yeah, I decided I'd put that up back there. Anyway, I'm glad that I had so many of you showing up for the live show today. Looks like we never quite broke 100, but we have at least 80 or 90, and I appreciate that. If you want to let me know which clips or what group of 2 or 3 clips you think I should turn into an excerpted video that will get more views from people than this hour-long video, let me know about that. And I should hopefully be making some other edited, produced video this week. I have a couple different topics that I've been working on, so look for that also. And of course, every Sunday, look for Liberal Viewer Sunday live clip roundup at 6:30 p.m. Pacific. I appreciate all of you joining me. I hope you enjoyed the clips that I picked out for you and that they left you a little bit more informed. For my viewers here in the United States and Canada and in these time zones, enjoy the rest of your weekend. In Europe and Australia and around the world, I hope you enjoy the beginning of your week. And I will be seeing you all around the internet.